Airbnb, the revolutionary short-term rental company that changed the way people vacation, was on an extraordinary run before the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted the world. At the height of the pandemic, Airbnb reported over $4.5 billion worth of losses as a result of people's fear of COVID-19. However, as the pandemic raged on and eventually came to an end, Airbnb found themselves in a peculiar situation. Airbnb hosts realized that they now held all of the power, and as a result, they became greedy. Hosts realized that they could get away with passing costs onto the customer and began charging customers insane fees. Additionally, the typical Airbnb host in the past was a family putting their home on Airbnb in hopes of gaining a little extra income here and there. The typical Airbnb host nowadays is a management company with an entire portfolio of Airbnbs that require a lot more money to break even. Due to all of this, the common Airbnb customer now typically thinks of Airbnb as too expensive, and in most situations would rather stay in a hotel, which is the exact opposite mindset that made Airbnb a multi-billion-dollar company in the first place. So how did Airbnb's reputation change so quickly, and why are people going back to hotels as opposed to staying in Airbnbs? Let's find out. Airbnb, originally called Air Bed and Breakfast, was founded in San Francisco, California by roommates Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia after they came up with the idea of putting an air mattress in their living room and turning it into a bed and breakfast. Before the company's website, airbedandbreakfast.com, officially launched, their third roommate Nathan Blecharks joined the team as the third co-founder. The company was then ready to go and officially launched on August 11, 2008. Later that summer in 2008, the founders had their very first customers when the Industrial Design Conference took place that year in San Francisco. Travelers attending the conference had trouble finding places to stay in the city, so the three young co-founders jumped on the opportunity and offered visitors the space to stay at their bed and breakfast. The three co-founders had absolutely no idea that they had just begun what would eventually become a multi-billion-dollar company and would disrupt the hotel and hospitality sector as we know it. Over the next year, the company received outside funding and began to grow at a rapid pace. Word quickly spread, and lots of people began signing up to have their homes available to rent on the platform. Airbnb classifies these people as hosts. People also began using the platform to book short-term vacations, as they were intrigued by this new style of renting and wanted to see what it could offer them that hotels couldn't. By March 2009, the site hit 10,000 users and 2,500 unique listings. That same month, the name of the company was officially shortened to the name that we all know today, Airbnb. As the years went by, business for the company was going great. The company introduced various unique features to further separate themselves from their competition, mainly the hotel industry. These features included neighborhoods, which were travel guides of some of the largest US cities that helped guests choose the right area to stay in. They also introduced experiences, which allowed users to book different activities in the area that they were staying in. Airbnb also began catering to the higher quality of guests, launching Airbnb Plus, which featured houses that were vetted for high quality of services and comfort, as well as Beyond by Airbnb, which offered luxury vacation rentals. Airbnb was doing a great job of separating themselves from the hotel industry, as they were going above and beyond to cater to all types of customers, as well as offering them unique experiences that hotels can't and don't offer. By 2019, the company was hosting 2 million people per night. Things were looking really bright for the short-term rental company. Unfortunately for Airbnb, they were about to have their entire business model crushed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic began raging across the country, and it's no surprise that not only Airbnb, but the entire hospitality industry was absolutely crushed. Total nights and experiences booked on Airbnb was on an incredible incline every year since 2015, as the company hit a record 327 million bookings in 2019. The next year in 2020, as COVID was sweeping the nation, that number fell to 193 million bookings. Gross booking value took a steep fall as well, peaking at $38 billion in 2019 and falling to $24 billion in 2020. Not only were bookings in a free fall, but Airbnb host listings were decreasing as well, as hosts didn't want to have people in their homes out of fear of the virus. Annual worldwide Airbnb listings dropped from 7 million in 2019 to just 5.6 million in 2020. Some other interesting figures that I found were the top 10 cities with the greatest loss of listings during the pandemic. From May 2020 to March 2021, Jersey City, New Jersey topped the list with a 61% drop in total listings. Seattle, Oakland, and New York followed in that order, losing 42%, 40%, and 31% of their listings respectively. So even if people wanted to travel during the pandemic, the lower availability of Airbnbs to stay at was making it even harder to do so. Airbnb, which was for years growing at an extremely rapid pace, now found themselves in jeopardy. Overall revenue for Airbnb fell to $3.3 billion in 2020, which was $1.5 billion less than the year before in 2019. Doesn't seem that bad, right? Well, let's take a look at the company's net income for the same year. In 2020, Airbnb reported a $4.5 billion loss, compared to just a $674 million loss the year before. A large factor in this staggering loss is that the company paid significant amounts of money to their hosts to make up for the hosts' loss of revenue from lowered bookings. Airbnb did this in an effort to sustain their business model in the long term, because they knew that eventually the pandemic would subside and they needed the hosts to still have their houses available for bookings once that inevitably happened. Towards the end of 2020, while the company was still being hit hard by the pandemic, Airbnb experienced an extremely successful IPO at a time when numerous tech companies were also having incredibly successful first trading days. The day before the company was set to officially list on the market, shares were priced in at $68. However, the next morning, as the company officially went public, shares opened at $146 and ended the day at $144.71. This represented first-day gains of 112% and gave Airbnb a valuation of $86.5 billion. For context, hotel giants Marriott and Hilton at the same time held valuations of $42 billion and $29 billion respectively. Not a bad IPO day for Airbnb. As the pandemic continued and eventually began to slow down, something extremely interesting happened. What happened post-pandemic to Airbnb is what I personally would describe as a theme of investors and stakeholders being happy and customers being upset. Very quickly, it became apparent that Airbnb hosts had a lot of leverage in this situation. 3 factors that gave them this leverage was the work-from-home trend, the ability for extended stays, and a safer environment as opposed to hotels. As people began to work from home, they realized that they could book Airbnbs in remote places that weren't near big cities, and thus made them feel safer from the virus. Not only was the location significant, but the comfort and various amenities that an Airbnb offered made extended stays more bearable as opposed to hotels, where extended stays could get quite stale. Finally, staying in a single house by yourself or with your loved ones provided a much safer environment than that of a hotel. While hotels can provide as many health and safety precautions as they want, at the end of the day, tons of people are still flowing in and out of the building every day, increasing the chances of contamination. Compare that to an Airbnb where only you and your family are staying in, and it's obvious which most people would prefer. So what does this increased leverage that Airbnb hosts have mean? It means they can charge visitors a lot more, and they can get away with a lot of stuff that they weren't able to pre-pandemic. There are countless Reddit posts like this one, where the user is asking for advice on whether to book an Airbnb or a hotel. The top reply states that many Airbnb owners, especially in popular areas, have gotten cocky. There are crazy rules and additional fees, and the owner's leaving a list of things you need to do prior to leaving. Multiple other replies also referred to the fees that Airbnb hosts now charge. Again, this is simply because the hosts feel like they can, because they have all the leverage in this situation. Another post begging the question of why Airbnbs are so much more expensive now was met with similar replies, such as one user referring to having to do lots of extra cleaning on top of already paying a significant cleaning fee. There is an additional factor to why Airbnbs seem to be much more expensive nowadays, and that is due to the changing types of hosts. In that same Reddit post I just mentioned, one user wrote, "In the past, Airbnb hosts were mostly people renting out their own homes. They were happy to make a little extra cash. However, as time has gone on, a lot of hosts have transitioned to full-time property managers, hosting a full portfolio of rental properties." The same user wrote, "Most full-time hosts use software to help them set the highest price to maximize revenue, so they are not leaving a lot of money on the table." Another user wrote that expensive properties solely used as rental properties demand a far higher rate to remain a good business investment than an owner-occupied space. In other words, Airbnb hosts who list their personal homes are okay leaving a little money on the table because hosting isn't their full-time job. They're just happy to receive any extra amount of money. On the other hand, when you own a property solely for rental purposes, you're gonna need to squeeze every penny out of the customer. Obviously, As a business owner, maximizing revenue is at the top of the list of priorities. However, I can understand how a long-term user of Airbnb who has been booking nights on the platform for years would be upset at the changing of the core business model of most hosts. All of this brings me back to the theme I mentioned earlier, of customers being upset, but investors and stakeholders being happy. Customers are upset because of the increased prices and tasks that they are forced to do. But why exactly are investors and stakeholders happy? Because the company's financials are looking better than ever. Total revenue for Airbnb in 2023 was just under $10 billion, which was more than double the pre-pandemic figure of $4.8 billion. And the company's net profit was $4.8 billion, a crazy rebound from the pandemic loss of $4.5 billion. As a result, the company's stock is up nearly 70% from its pandemic low of $91. So, while the customers seem to generally not be satisfied, it seems that Airbnb is doing better than ever. So what does the future of Airbnb hold? Will the customers finally have enough of the increasing prices and fees and go back to using hotels? Will Airbnb's revenue begin to flatten or even drop? Only time will tell. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and don't forget to subscribe for more business and finance videos.